They say some truths are better left buried. Some stories, no matter how loudly they scream, are meant to stay in the shadows. But I cannot. I found a secret in my mother's room, a secret so dark that it stains the air around it. And now I cannot unsee it. I am Kelechi, 19 years old, and I grew up with Amara, my step-elder sister. I loved her more than anyone in this world, more than life itself. We shared everything, from the small joys of catching cicadas in the rainy season to the secret hideouts behind the tall walls of our father's estate. She was my world, my sister, my friend, my guardian in the confusing labyrinth of childhood. Our father, Chief Obinna, was wealthy beyond measure. People whispered about the riches he amassed, stories of lands, of businesses, of gold and houses that reached the clouds. But in our house, wealth was never a shield for secrets, not for the ones that lurked behind the painted smiles and polite conversations. Amara's mother had died when I was very young. I barely remember her face. All I knew was that she had been sick, that our father had loved her in his way, and that life had moved on with a strange, silent swiftness. Her death was like a story told in whispers, never fully explained, never confronted. And so I never asked. How could I, when I had Amara by my side? She was my sunshine and my comfort, and I loved her so dearly that even the gaps of her past didn't matter, or so I thought. The story changed on the day I found the diary. I had been wandering the house, restless after a quarrel with my father. I had always been a quiet boy, cautious, thinking too much, but that day, my heart was a storm. I went into my mother's old room, the one that had been locked since her death. The air was thick with dust and something faintly sweet, almost medicinal, like the smell of old flowers preserved in glass jars. The furniture was covered in white sheets, like ghosts frozen in time. It was in the corner of that room, behind a small, locked drawer, that I found it. A leather-bound diary, worn at the edges, its pages yellowed but intact. My mother's handwriting spilled across the first page, elegant and deliberate, and I knew immediately that what I was holding was a voice from the past, her voice whispering from beyond the grave. I sat on the floor, heart pounding, and began to read. At first, it was the ordinary details of a woman's life. She wrote about her days as a nurse, about the patients she tended to, the fatigue in her bones and the compassion in her hands. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted. The ordinary transformed into the sinister. My mother, my sweet, gentle mother, was not who I had imagined. She had been the nurse to Amara's mother, a kind, delicate woman, sickly, who trusted her nurse with her life. But somewhere along the line, my mother fell in love with my father. Not the romantic, soft love that stories tell in whispers and candlelight, but a desire that poisoned her heart. She wrote in precise, clinical detail how she administered small doses of something into Amara's mother's food, something to weaken her, to make her sickly, until her death came quietly and without question. I could not breathe. My fingers shook. The diary trembled in my hands. Every word was a dagger, twisting in a place I did not know existed in me. The woman I had known as my mother, the woman who had cradled me as an infant, who had sung lullabies into my ears, who had whispered courage into my frightened heart, was a murderer. Yet, she was also the one who became a mother to Amara. She had comforted her, nurtured her, protected her from the grief of losing her real mother. And then she gave birth to me, my existence, the product of her love for my father and the shadow of her crimes. I wanted to throw the diary across the room, to destroy it, to pretend I had never read it. But some things once seen cannot be unseen. Some truths once touched cling to your soul. I sat there for hours, reading every line, trying to understand how the woman who had been my world could be the architect of such darkness. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the room in orange and purple streaks, I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. I was carrying a secret that could destroy everything. My sister, my father, even the memory of the mother I had loved without question. I tried to imagine Amara knowing. Could she forgive the woman who had killed her mother? Could she forgive the woman who had raised her and then held a child? the child she would come to love like her own? I did not know, and I did not know if I could ever tell her. That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind shake the trees outside. I could hear the distant laughter of children in the estate compound, their joy a stark contrast to the turmoil in my chest. And then I realized something even more terrifying. The story did not belong to the past alone. It belonged to me now. I could not ignore it. I could not pretend. The diary had given me a choice: to bury it, to hide it, and live in ignorance, or to confront it, to pull it into the light, and risk shattering the fragile world we had built. But how do you confront a truth that could undo the fabric of your family? How do you tell someone that the mother they loved was the hand that ended the life of their own? How do you live knowing that your own existence is the echo of someone else's crime? I do not know the answers. I only know that I hold them and that I must decide. And the decision is mine alone. As I closed the diary that night, I made a promise to myself. I would not rush. I would not act without understanding. I would watch, I would listen, and I would wait. But deep inside, I felt the storm of my own heart begin to stir. The love I had for Amara, the respect I had for my father, the memory of my mother. All of it tangled in a web of lies and truths that I could not yet untangle. And so, I remain in the shadows, holding a secret too heavy for my 19-year-old shoulders. A secret that will shape the days to come. A secret that will test the bonds of love, trust, and family in ways I cannot yet imagine. Some say a family is built on truth. Some say it is built on love. I have learned that it can also be built on lies, on shadows, on the things we do not speak of in daylight. And in that knowledge, I have begun to understand what it means to be a man, to inherit a past not of your making, and to carry it forward without letting it destroy you. Tomorrow I will see Amara. I will watch her smile, her eyes bright and unaware, and I will feel the weight of the diary pressing against my chest, and I will have to decide. Do I reveal the story that could tear her world apart, or do I guard it as fiercely as my own heart? The night is long, and the shadows are patient, but even the shadows cannot hide the truth forever. And this is only the beginning. The morning after I found the diary, the world seemed different. The sun rose in the same golden blaze over the estate, but its light felt sharp, intrusive, like it was cutting through the veils I had worn to see life clearly. I walked through the halls of our home with a new awareness, every corner hiding secrets, every smile masking intent. Amara was in the garden, as she always was in the mornings, tending to the flowers my mother had once planted. She hummed softly, a melody I had known since childhood, a song that used to make all my fears melt away, but today it pierced me like a blade. I could not reconcile the innocence in her laughter with the darkness I now carried. I watched her for a long while, hiding behind a column, listening to her speak to the roses as if they were old friends. My chest tightened. I loved her, more than I could bear to admit, more than I could possibly say. And yet, that love now came with fear. A fear that the story in my mother's diary could destroy the fragile happiness of our family. I thought about confronting my father. Chief Obinna was a man of authority, a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. I had always admired him, even as a boy, but now, with the diary in my hands, I felt a creeping suspicion about him too. Had he known? Could he have known that the woman he loved, the woman he trusted, had been hiding a terrible secret? Or was he as blind as I had been, dancing in ignorance while the truth rotted beneath the surface? I tried to focus on ordinary things. I helped Amara water the plants. I carried baskets of soil. I laughed at her jokes, though the sound felt hollow in my chest. And yet, in the depths of my mind, the diary's words replayed like a twisted lullaby. My mother, her calm smile, her gentle hands, the hands that had held me as a baby, the hands that had nurtured Amara, had also been the hands that ended another life. I could not bear to see her face without thinking of the poison, the slow and deliberate cruelty she had committed. And yet she had loved us. She had given her life to caring for my father and Amara. She had created me, nurtured me, and protected us in ways that no one else could. Could love coexist with evil? Could a heart that killed also cradle? I did not know, and that uncertainty gnawed at my soul. Days passed, and I carried the secret like a stone in my chest. Every glance at my father, every laugh shared with Amara, every meal eaten in the dining hall felt like walking on a tightrope over a chasm. I tried to forget the diary, to push it out of my mind, but the words had roots now. They grew in silence, creeping into my dreams, twisting my thoughts. One evening, I found myself alone in my father's study. The house was quiet, the servants had retired, and the walls seemed to hum with the memory of whispered conversations and hidden truths. I opened the diary again, hoping for clarity, hoping for guidance. But clarity did not come. Instead, I found myself staring at my mother's handwriting, tracing the lines that described the slow decline of Amara's real mother, the careful administration of poison disguised as medicine. And then, a thought struck me that I could not shake. If my mother had done this, could she have done other things too? Could there be more secrets, buried deeper, waiting for the right moment to surface? I shivered. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a labyrinth of shadows, and I was its prisoner. That night I could not sleep. I lay awake, listening to the distant hoot of owls and the rustle of leaves against the windows. I imagined my mother's voice, soft and gentle, whispering apologies I could not hear. I imagined Amara discovering the truth, her eyes wide with disbelief, her laughter gone forever. I imagined my father's face, a mask of pride and grief, and I wondered if I could ever face him again. The days that followed were a delicate dance. I acted normal, joked with Amara, helped her with her studies, and walked with my father through the sprawling estate gardens. I watched them both with new eyes, analyzing every word, every gesture, every glance. And the more I watched, the more I realized how fragile the world truly was. One word, one revelation, and it could all collapse. Then came the day I saw Amara differently. We were in the library, a room filled with the smell of old books and polished wood. She was reading aloud, her voice soft and musical, when she paused, looking at a photograph of her mother and my mother together. It was an old picture, taken before my birth, before the diary had revealed its secrets. "Mother always loved you," she said softly, her eyes misting. "Even when she was sick, she would talk about you, like you were a guardian angel." Her words stabbed me. I wanted to scream, to tear the photograph into pieces, to erase the memory of the woman who had killed her mother. But I could not. I only nodded, my throat tight. "Yes," I said. "She did." But the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. I wondered if Amara could ever forgive the woman who had betrayed her trust, the woman who had been her comfort yet her destroyer. And I realized then that the diary had changed more than my understanding of the past. It had changed my love for her. My love was no longer simple, no longer pure. It was tangled with suspicion, fear, and the weight of a truth too terrible to speak. That night, I made my way back to my mother's old room. I needed to feel close to her, to understand how a woman who could do such things could also inspire such love. I ran my fingers over the diary, tracing the words she had written in a hand that had once soothed my cries as a baby. I wanted answers, but the diary offered none. Only questions, dark and twisting, that I could not escape. And then I realized something else. The diary was not just a record of the past. It was a test of loyalty, of courage, of love. It asked me to decide what kind of man I would be. Would I be consumed by the darkness, letting it define me? Or would I find a way to rise above it, to protect the people I loved? Even if the truth remained hidden, I did not have an answer, but I had a plan. I would watch, I would listen, I would learn, and I would wait for the right moment. The moment when the truth could no longer be hidden. The moment when I could act, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Because love, I realized, was not always about knowing the truth. Sometimes it was about choosing to protect, to forgive, and to endure. And I loved Amara enough to endure anything, even the weight of a secret that could destroy us all. The nights grew colder, and the shadows longer, and I began to notice subtle changes in our home. The servants moved with quiet tension. My father's smile sometimes faltered, his eyes clouded with unspoken thoughts. And Amara remained blissfully unaware, radiant in her innocence, but I could see the cracks forming in the world around her. One night, as I stared at the ceiling, I whispered a promise into the darkness. I will protect her, no matter what it takes, no matter the cost. And as the wind howled through the trees outside, I felt the weight of the diary settle against my chest once more. It was a burden, yes, but also a guide. A guide to a truth too terrible to confront yet too important to ignore. The shadows are patient. They wait for the moment we falter, and I know that moment is coming. But until it does, I will hold my secret close, guarding it as fiercely as I guard my love for Amara. Because some truths I have learned are like fire. Handle them carelessly, and they burn everything in their path. Handle them wisely, and they illuminate the darkness. And I must learn to handle this fire. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm that never ended. I could see it now, every smile, every gentle word, every gesture in our house carried a hidden weight. I moved through the estate as though the walls themselves were watching me, whispering reminders of the secret I carried. Amara remained the same, radiant and kind, blissfully unaware of the shadows that clung to our family. She laughed with the ease of someone untouched by darkness, her warmth like sunlight pouring into rooms I had come to see as haunted. And yet, with every glance, I saw a question in her eyes, a quiet intuition that something had changed, that the air between us was heavier than it should be. I could not tell her the truth, not yet. Could I even tell her at all? The thought of her learning that the woman who had raised her, who had held her through her grief, had also been the hand that ended her real mother's life, made my stomach twist in knots. And my father would not know what to do either. He had loved my mother, and he had loved Amara, trusting in the woman who had nurtured both of us. How much could he bear to learn? I decided to watch, to gather understanding before acting. I observed my father's routines, listened to the careful words exchanged in the evenings, and studied Amara's expressions as she moved through the house. It was a dangerous balance. One wrong word, one slip, and the fragile world could shatter. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in bruised purples and golds, I found Amara alone in the garden. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, and the last birds of the day sang softly as they returned to their nests. I approached her cautiously, my heart hammering like a drum in my chest. She looked up at me and smiled, the kind of smile that could melt the hardest of hearts. "Kelechi, you've been quiet lately. Is something troubling you?" I wanted to speak. I wanted to tell her everything. The diary, the poison, the truth that had shattered my understanding of our past. But I could not. The words lodged in my throat, heavy and impossible. I realized in that moment that some truths are not meant to be spoken lightly, and some stories must be told with care or not at all. I've been thinking, I said slowly, about family, about the past, about everything. Amara tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that I hoped looked natural. "I mean, that sometimes the people we love make mistakes, terrible mistakes, but love can endure if we choose to forgive." Her eyes softened. "Forgive? Even the ones who hurt us?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Even them." I realized then that the diary was not just a record of my mother's crime. It was a lesson, a mirror of human complexity. She was cruel, yes, but she was also loving. She had made choices that were unthinkable, yet she had also given life, protection, and warmth. Could I forgive her? Could I protect Amara from the weight of her mother's actions? Could I shield my father from grief while honoring the memory of the woman he loved? The answer, I decided, was yes, but only if I carried the truth alone. That night, I returned to my mother's room one last time. I opened the diary, tracing the words with my fingers as if trying to absorb some of the courage my mother had once held. I whispered a silent farewell to her voice, a voice that had nurtured me and yet carried the shadow of death. I made a choice. I would guard this secret not to deceive, but to protect. I would let Amara live in the light of the mother she remembered, not the darkness of the one who had died before her time. I would let my father cherish the love he had shared with my mother, unburdened by the knowledge of betrayal. And I would carry the shadow alone, learning from it, growing stronger, and honoring the truth through the choices I made in life. The days passed, and life continued in its quiet rhythm. I watched Amara, laughing, studying, caring for the garden, and I felt a protective warmth fill me. I watched my father, wise and careful, moving through the house with the dignity and patience that had always been his shield. And I realized that sometimes, love is not about revealing every truth. Sometimes, love is about carrying burdens so others do not have to. One evening, as we dined together in the candlelit dining hall, I looked around at the faces of my family, faces that were both familiar and fragile. I realized then that life is built on layers, of joy and grief, of light and shadow, of love and mistakes. And it is in choosing which layers to reveal, which to conceal, that we define the families we build, the bonds we cherish, and the legacy we leave behind. Amara smiled across the table at me, her eyes bright and trusting, and I felt the full weight of my promise. I would protect her, even from the truth that could tear her heart apart. I would guard my father's memories, even from the shadow of betrayal. And I would honor my mother, complex and flawed as she was, by carrying her secret with courage. In the quiet of the night, after the candles had burned low, I returned to my mother's old room one last time. I closed the diary and placed it in the locked drawer, knowing that its pages would remain safe, hidden from the world. And as I turned to leave, I whispered into the darkness. Some truths are too heavy for those we love. Some shadows are meant to guide us, not destroy us. And I will carry them so you do not have to. I stepped into the hall, feeling the air shift as though the house itself had exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I felt a measure of peace. The storm within me had not vanished, but it had been tamed, shaped into a strength I had not known I possessed. Life continued in its strange, unrelenting way. Amara grew more radiant each day. My father moved with the quiet pride of a man who had weathered many storms, and I walked between the shadows and the light, carrying a secret that would forever shape the man I was becoming. And in the end, I understood something my mother had never written in her diary. Love is not about perfection. Love is not about truth alone. Love is about protection, sacrifice, and courage. It is about holding the world together when it threatens to fall apart. I am Kelechi, and I carry a shadow. But that shadow has taught me the most important lesson of all. That even in darkness, even in betrayal, even in secrets that could destroy us, love remains. It endures, protects, and it guides those who are brave enough to carry it. Some say family is built on truth. Some say it is built on love. I have learned that it is built on both, but sometimes love must shield the truth so the hearts that matter most can survive. And so, my story ends here, not with vengeance, not with revelation, but with a promise. A promise to protect, to endure, and to love, even when the truth is a fire too dangerous to touch. And as I close my eyes each night, I hear my mother's voice once more, not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a lesson. Carry the burden, Kelechi. Guard the love. Let it be your guide, and you will survive the darkness. And I have